later about the excellent annual MedTech conference. I think I've managed to miss some slides. I'm just going to go back briefly and see if I can find where those have gone. No, they seem to have disappeared. There is, as Lucas says, always something that happens. So let me just speak to those briefly. As well as our funding from the Federal Department of Industry, we also administer approximately currently 165 million and will soon be about $190 million worth of Medical Research Future Fund funding across 4 programs. The first 2, the funding is all fully committed. It's about 60 odd million to support early stage commercialization of medtech and therapeutic development. I won't speak too much about those because that funding is all fully committed. We run a program called the READY program, which is all around workforce skills and development, and I'll come back to that in 1 second. And for the sake of completeness, we also run a program called the Targeted Translation Research Accelerator, which is $45 million to help translate research relevant to cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Now, most of the funding that we administer through those programs is not open to international companies, but I would like to bring your attention to specifically the READY fellowships that we run, which allow companies anywhere in the world to apply to us to receive funding to second an academic or clinical researcher from Australia into your business for a period of 6 to 12 months to work on a defined program. We pay salary and on costs for that period. So if you have a connection in Australia already, or you feel that you would get value out of getting an Australian expert into your business for a period, then I'd welcome discussion about that. The purpose there is not to try and lure academics or clinicians out of their careers into industry, but to give them understanding of what it's like to work in industry. I'd like to turn now to some discussion about Australia as a clinical trials destination. And as I said earlier, Australia ran about 1,880 clinical trials started about that many in 2019 before COVID-19, which reached about 95,000 patients, supported about 8,000 jobs and about 1.4 billion in revenue. It's also an approximately 5% share of global industry-sponsored trials. There are a number of reasons why Australia is a very good place to consider running your trials in. We have medical experts and research staff which are truly of global standing. Australia's investigators and our clinical trial network are seen as among the best in the world. We have very high quality of research and data. Australia has, again, an excellent global reputation in science and research that is evidenced by our level of high quality publications. We have specialised and dedicated infrastructure, particularly for phase 1 pharmaceutical trials, but I'm going to talk more about devices in a minute. We have a very good streamlined regulatory and ethics approval process, and I know a colleague from the TGA will speak to you more about that. And we have a very favourable R&D tax incentive program, which I'll again talk a bit more about in 1 second. I've managed to miss some other slides. I have a slide, I'm not sure what's going on here, but some of my slides have disappeared. I did have a slide here that was taken from a webinar that we did with a global European-based medical devices company that talked about the reasons why they do their clinical trials in Australia. And the reason that I wanted to show that was because entirely without coaching, they echoed many of the sentiments that we put forward for why it's good to run trials in Australia. While I can't tell you who the company were, they talked about things such as the ease of transfer of trial data from Australian trials to CE or US FDA applications. They talked about the cultural diversity in Australia. With our proximity to Asia, we have a very diverse cultural background in our country, and also talked about things, echoed some of the things that I've shown in this slide here. This is making things difficult with slides missing. So I've talked about where we have strengths, and these are some of the things that we've identified in our 2021 research paper about where we plan to improve in the future. So we found that where one of the other things that was mentioned by the company that I wanted to show you was that in terms of finding people to enroll in trials, Australia is excellent. However, in our report that we released this year, we found that one area that we could improve was in terms of improving patient awareness, engagement, and patient centricity. We also can improve the integration of digital health into our trials, particularly artificial intelligence, and simplifying policies, particularly in relation to software as a medical device. Australia is already reasonably advanced in precision healthcare, but again, an area where we feel that we can invest that will deliver value. And we also feel that investing in innovative trial designs is another area where we can benefit. So the investment that we've put into clinical trials over the period 2015 to 2019 has really paid off, particularly for early stage pharmaceutical trials. You can see that over that period, the phase 1 trials, where we have put the majority of our investment, has seen a 14.5% CAGR. Where we haven't seen quite the same increase is in device trials. So we see this as an area where we can really invest and do better, and it's an area of priority. And part of what we've done to achieve that is we've joined with the Australian Cardiovascular Alliance to set up Venturi Clinical, which is specifically focused on growing the number of early stage and supporting cardiovascular device trials in Australia, including by linking companies like yourselves with leading Australian cardiologists. You'd be familiar with many of the multinational CROs that work in Australia, like Agoria, Syneos, Paraxel. They're all active here, as well as other local CROs who specialise in device trials. So that's a very quick snapshot of the Australian sector, although I apologise for missing some slides. If you would like to know more, we produce a document regularly called our Sector Competitiveness Plan, which is available on our website under the tabs page, mtpconnect.org.au. The federal government's recent National Manufacturing Priority Roadmap for Medical Products also includes some very valuable insights on the Australian sector, including various opportunities that would be relevant to companies such as yourselves. We've even managed to lose my contact details as the final slide, so I'll make sure that Luca has those available. MTP Connect exists to help facilitate contacts within the sector. So if you have any interest in becoming active in Australia, I welcome you getting in contact, and I will make sure that Luca has a copy of the full presentation that he can share with you that will include my phone number and email. And with that, I'll hand back to you. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Duncan. And yeah, technical problems, the same before, so I sympathize with you. Thank you for the overview of the medtech sector, and also very interesting data related to clinical trials, also about the innovative trials designs. That's very interesting also for Flemish companies. So thank you again. And please let me now introduce Alfredo Martinez-Cole, Director of Business Relationships Biomedical at the University of Technology, Sydney, and also part of the MedTech Advisory Group. And I also to especially thank Alfredo because he is wearing a yellow pair of glasses just in honor of Flanders. So thank you, Alfredo. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca. I'm going to start sharing my presentation now. So 1 second, here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so Thank you very much to Luca for the invitation. Good morning to you guys in Europe, and good evening to those joining from other parts of the world where it's late. So I'd like to follow up on Duncan's presentation on the medtech sector in Australia. And Luca asked me to speak about the research landscape and tech transfer and some of the government funding schemes and things like that. And I think that, you know, from the point of view of a company that's interested in engaging with Australian researchers and with the Australian ecosystem, I think this kind of pointers will be quite useful. So here we go. I guess the first point of contact, if you want to engage with research in Australia, it's obviously universities and medical research institutes. The other point of contact, the major point of contact, is through the CSIRO, which is our national research organization, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. So if you want to engage with universities, you do it generally through the tech transfer or commercialization office or equivalent in each one of these universities. They would have a catalog of inventions available for partnering. They'd be responsible for managing intellectual property. They negotiate licenses, options, and assignment agreements, and they assist with research collaborations with other institutions as well as with industry engagement activities. They assist in identifying funding and in some instances in writing funding applications as well. The advantage of Australia, even though as both Luca and Duncan spoke about and showed this map, although the country is very large, we are very well connected. We are a small group of tech transfer professionals. When I was in tech transfer, we all know each other and we're well connected. So any point of contact that you touch within Australia, will be happy to connect you with the necessary people. We know how to do that and we're happy to do it. So the other major point of contact and important for you to connect with the various universities is through Knowledge Commercialization Australasia, which is the professional body that represents all the tech transfer offices, both universities and medical research institutes. So instead of you trying to find one point of contact with one university in Sydney or a university in Melbourne or Brisbane, you go to KCA, you say, I would like the ability to try to find out how to connect with all these different universities and what technologies are available. KCA will facilitate those introductions for you. The other one is the Association of Australian Medical Research Institutes, AAMRI in Australia. Although most medical research institutes are affiliated with a university and therefore the tech transfer office of that university normally manages the IP for the MRI, the MRI, some of the larger MRIs have their own tech transfer offices, and so it's important that you also are aware of AMRI. CSIRO, being the largest research organization in Australia, is a very, very important point of contact. So CSIRO has a number of business units, and this is taken straight from their website. The most important one to highlight and relevant to this group is health and medical research, obviously. CSIRO has its own funding available to support innovation programs and commercialization and IP management. They also provide a number of services to the ecosystem around consulting services. They can do tests, you know, for industry standard tests, and a whole bunch of other things. If you go on the CSIRO website, you will find that it's easy to navigate, and you'll find all the information on what they do and who to contact there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with tech transfer. So I did tech transfer in university for about 13, 14 years. And the experiences both in the US and in Europe might be very different. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about what the landscape is like here with regards to tech transfer, right? So most of the available patented technologies are very early stage. They require further research or they require proof of concept. Most of the patents that you will find at these universities and medical research institutes are either at a provisional stage or PCT, we rarely have portfolios of granted patents available for licensing because the universities are not able to take all these patents through the whole way, right? Opportunity for companies to provide strategic advice, tech gaps, and market information to improve base IP. So this is a really key aspect of why you should engage with Australia, right? You're going to find good IP, base IP, with your strategic positioning in the marketplace. You can steer that IP into a much stronger position, right? The university is very happy to engage with companies for additional research and proof of concept studies, right? Licensing terms in most technologies, this is not something that happens in every instance. It depends on the stage of the technology, the type of technology, so forth and so on. Include IP cost recovery, short-term developmental milestones, and royalties, and ideally a research contract back with the university for additional technology development. This is what most universities would like out of a license with a company. Universities can apply for government funding to continue to develop IP. So it's always an advantage to keep the IP at the university, to keep the IP being owned by the university, because it allows for that additional injection of funding that companies are not able to access directly through the university. The asterisk there about royalties is the preference is for near-term, regular, consistent income, as opposed to banking or putting all the eggs in the basket of the technology being a blockbuster and making billions of dollars in 10 years. So research support, what's available for research support? There are a number of entities that can provide assistance around research funding, connections, programs, professional and industry groups, and government entities. And I've listed a handful here, but this is not a comprehensive list. It gives you a really good idea of what the ecosystem looks like, and all these organizations are really well connected between themselves, and any one of those touch points will be able to connect you with any other touch points that you need to. So you heard from Duncan at MTP Connect. You will hear from Claire at AustBiotech, and you will hear also from TGA and a few other places. The key group for you guys overseas is Austrade. Austrade has a number of, which is similar to Flanders Trade Invest for Australia, right? So Austrade has a number of offices in Europe and in the US and Asia Pacific, and they can assist with contacts in Australia. So I strongly advise that you visit Australia, and if you haven't engaged with Australia in your area, that you do. With regards to research funding, the key thing to know is the Australian, all the money for research is basically in the basket of what it's called the Medical Research Future Fund, the MRFF. It's a $20 billion fund, and it has a number of priorities for investment. Those priorities change every couple of years, and the latest priorities are as shown on the screen. It's not intended that I'm going to read all of this, but so it's just for your benefit to know what the current priorities are. Those will change at the end of 2022. So the other bits of research funding come through competitive grant schemes, and this is traditional funding for researchers. And although directly overseas entities and researchers are not able to access this funding, the reason why I'm making you aware of this is because the second you start collaborating with these Australian entities, through that group of people, you're able to access and leverage all these different funding schemes that are available. The Australian Research Council provides a number of different programs, and the ones listed here are all available for international companies to access, right? So if you are interested in accessing and participating in any one of these schemes, you are eligible to do so. The ARC funds mostly technological development, so not medical research. It will fund potentially digital health platforms. It will fund software and things like that, databases, anything that's sort of techy, it will fund. It will not fund hardcore medical research. The medical research falls under the National Health and Medical Research Council. And again, there's a link there to all the international and engagement opportunities. And I wanted to bring to your attention the one around international affiliations with the European Research Council. They have signed an agreement, and it allows for NHMRC funded researchers to join the European Research Council, supported research teams in Europe for a period of time when possible, or work on remotely during their grant, and enables the exchange of ideas and experiences in cutting edge science. So it's just to make you aware of what's around and how you can leverage that. The next one that I have, now I'm, hold on, not able to advance the presentation, excuse me. Okay. Okay, so the next one that I have is with regards to research funding. You heard from MTP Connect. MTP Connect is managing a number of the MRFF programs. And as Duncan mentioned, some of the programs, the READY program, the BioMedTech Horizons, and a few others, a lot of the funding has been exhausted, but some continue to have money available, as the READY program, the internship exchange program. Us Industry is another great point of contact, CSRO. I've listed a handful of schemes here which are available to international companies and researchers. The cooperative research centers are very large funding opportunities, $50–60 million match funding, and usually for consortia of up to 50 or more entities involved. They're for 10-year sort of centers around key areas of priority for Australian research. There's a smaller grant called the CRCP, the Cooperative Research Center Project, and those are for projects up to 3 years, up to $3 million in funding with a 50-50 match funding. The applicant has to be an Australian entity, but obviously you can have participation through collaboration with Australian entities. The Global Innovation Linkages, these are grants that run every couple of years. The last round was announced earlier this year, so there'll be another round coming up in 2023, and their grants up to $1 million. And all European economies, all European countries are eligible for the Global Innovation Linkages, so it's a really good one to keep in mind. There is money for clinical trials, and as Duncan mentioned, there's a lot of focus and a lot of support for clinical trials, both through MRFF and NHMRC. There's a number of state-based initiatives, one of them being the Victorian Health and Innovation Centre, the New South Wales Medical Devices Fund, Advanced Queensland, Adelaide Biomed City, which is in South Australia, the Western Australian Innovation Fund, and there's a number of health and medical research precincts. There's also, Duncan also mentioned the R&D tax incentive. There is a very little sort of outline there what it's for. You can have up to 43.5% refundable tax offset for R&D activities conducted prior to July 1, 2021. If your eligible expenditure exceeds $100 million for an income year, the tax offset is calculated using your company tax rate. So there is a program that's been put in place to attract, R&D activities, clinical trials in Australia. Obviously, the larger companies would get a reduced tax offset, but I strongly advise you to visit the business.gov.au RDTI website, because it has lots of information on how you can manage this, and they can connect you with the right people. The other thing to be aware of is investment capital that's around the medtech sector at the moment. The Biomedical Translation Fund is a $500 million fund. Sorry, it's not $500. That would not take you very far in the medtech. It's $500 million. There's also the CSRO Innovation Fund managed by Main Sequence Ventures. It's also another $5 million fund. And there are a number of VCs, family offices, angel funds around to support all this work. So connecting with the sector, very important. The AusBiotech National Conference will happen every year in late October. The MedTech Conference, which will happen in May this year. Flanders Invest was part of this year's AusMedTech, sorry, and the MTAA conference, which happens in November. There's a number of accelerators, incubators, business support programs. The actuator, which you will hear from Buzz Palmer in a couple of minutes. Cicada Innovations, the Medical Device Partnering Program, Sydney Startup Hub, and Health, LaunchVic, Siri. The list goes on. What I'm trying to show is there's a lot of activity here, and I'm not listing absolutely everything that's available, obviously. So it's just to give you a flavor that there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of support available. So it's a good place to come and try to partner. And the other take-home message is awareness and alignment with national priorities. MRFF and NHMRC put out funding priorities, as does NTP Connect with sector priorities. And as was mentioned earlier as well, the Medical Products National Manufacturing Priorities Roadmap. So if your research interests, your product development interests, your company interests align with those priorities, with those general overarching priorities, you are in a good position to partner with Australia and try to obtain additional funding for your work. Sorry. My last slide. Thank you very much. And my contact details are there if you want to connect. And with that, I pass back to Luca.
Thank you, Alfredo. I'm quite impressed. I think that in 15 minutes, you were able to provide a very comprehensive overview, not only about tech transfer and the research funding, but also about grant schemes. So it's quite an impressive volume of data and information that would be definitely very interesting for the Flemish companies. 2 comments on this. You introduced me to the Knowledge Commercialization Australasia, and I must say that they reply after 20 minutes. I sent an email, and I was very happy about the conversation I had with them. And you mentioned also Austrade. It's good to know because we have also Freddy Dutoit from Paris, office of Austrade, linked to this webinar. So he will be able also to assist Flemish companies in relation to additional information about the Australian market. Again, thank you, Alfredo. Impressive presentation. Now I'd like to give the floor to Bas Palmer. He is the CEO of the MedTech Actuator, and he will provide us with a quite interesting overview of the startup ecosystem here in Australia. Thank you, Bas.
All right, thank you, Luca. Hopefully it is a quite interesting presentation. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend a few moments of your time to talk a little bit about the startup space here in Australia, which is actually incredibly dynamic and interesting at the moment. I'd love to talk just a little bit through that, but just a quick introduction. So my name is Bas Palmer. I'm actually the co-founder of the MedTech Actuator, which is a national medical technology commercialization organization. And we're based in Melbourne, Australia, but we run nationally. And we've opened up offices in Singapore and Japan, and we work across India, Vietnam, and South Korea as well, using mainly with Australian startups and startups that find themselves into Australia and looking to expand into the Asia Pacific region, which is an incredible region of opportunity for many startups. And Australia presents itself as a very useful base for being able to do that. And as both Duncan and Alfredo have mentioned, there's so many advantages of being here in Australia when it comes to R&D tax incentives, when it comes to accessing particular markets, when it comes to clinical trials, even manufacturing and distribution. There's some unique elements here in Australia that you don't find elsewhere, and some of the capabilities, especially around product development, are extremely strong in this country as well. So it makes it quite a really interesting place to be able to commercialize early stage technologies. And as Alfredo and Duncan have also mentioned, the investment capital market is growing significantly in Australia. There's a lot more capital around than we've ever seen before. And I think partly that's due to the fact that history, if we look at history, we tend to see that post-war or post-pandemic, we see a decade of innovation in health. And we've seen this throughout history. And now as as health tech startups and medtech startups, we're at the precipice of change, and the markets are starting to adapt and see this change and see this opportunity. And as people start moving away into this kind of impact orientated health moment as well, we're seeing a new flavor of capital coming in from both impact investors, family offices, but also corporate investors coming in with a different element and a different sort of corporate citizenship mindset. So this is very, very interesting. Of course, in Australia, we're on the cusp of the likes of Singapore and China and Japan and India, and so we're seeing a lot of capital moving from those states as well. I thought I might just give you a bit of an overview as to what we do and how we do it, and why I think it's really important, if you're entering a country, to enter a village of expertise and a village of those that are willing to help a particular kind of ecosystem. So we were founded about 3.5 years ago at MTP Connect, and were able to give us our foundational capital to get going. But we've got about 120 partners now, but we have some foundation partners, and the good thing about these partners is that they're all wanting to work with startups, they're all wanting to engage with startups, and they're all wanting to enable startups wherever they can, whether that's from a funding perspective, a distribution perspective, simply a mentoring perspective, or with the likes of Ramsay Healthcare, the ability to access clinicians and large hospitals. And so these partners all contribute financially to our organization, and they're all looking for deal flow and for opportunities to gain a technical advantage in some of their product lines. As I mentioned before, we also have another 85 partners, so 120 in total. That essentially, these are the village. These are the organizations that want to help startups, to help them grow. They're very sophisticated. They're very capable. A lot of them are service-based, but just have a significant capability and understanding of the commercialization market. And one thing that I think Australians have learned very, very quickly is to think global from day one, because we have to. As a relatively small population, we're always working on a global commercialization objective. And so having the right partners, whether it's in clinical trials, whether it's in supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, regs, reimbursement, whatever it might be, having that capability is really important. And so one thing I've learned while being here in Australia is that it's a very dynamic, a very open, a very willing, and a very collaborative society. And the ecosystem is extremely strong in enabling early stage startups and founders to create something that's quite unique and quite innovative. As an organization, as I said, we've been around for just over 3 years now, and we've done pretty well. So we have an exclusive fund that we have, and we're just raising our second fund right now, which will be announced Q1 next year. But we've got 55 startups that have come into our accelerator program. I'll quickly go to that in just a moment. But we run lots of other programs, which we've seen about 400 startups in the last 3 years. But we're, as I mentioned before, very, very focused on collaborative moments, and we've got about 2,500 clinicians and innovators that have been part of our programs, and we now have 250 mentors as well that come from corporates, that come from hospitals, but also come from serial entrepreneurs that are looking to engage with early stage startups and kind of pay it forward mentality, which I think is just quite wonderful. So a quick overview as to some of the programs that we do. Our flagship program is our accelerator. So it's a venture-backed accelerator. It's a 15-month program. As we all know, commercializing medtech is a rather long process, and there's about 39 strategic decisions that need to be made during that commercialization process. And so we've brought together an accelerator that allows startups to understand those and make more informed choices about the directions that they need to take. And so we take 10 to 12 startups annually in this. It starts July every year, although next year we're going to open up to 20 startups across Australia and the Asia Pacific region, partly because of the scalability that we're having as an organization and because of the new locations that we're sitting in across Asia. It's worth noting that all the startups that come into the program do that from within Australia, and we travel around Australia and we meet the best and the brightest organizations that are wanting to help achieve. So that's really exciting. We also run some early stage programs. One's called Origin, which is basically around superhero entrepreneurs and welcoming them to this ecosystem of innovation. It's a national competition. We've been running it for a little while now. In fact, our gala dinner is tomorrow night, where we've got a black tie dinner celebrating all cool things that are startup and founder, and we have a few glasses of wine as we watch startups pitch, and it's always a wonderful evening of fun and joy, and very passionate sort of opportunity. And then we run lots of education things as well, fellowships and scholarships, as well as lots of we have 11 hospital partners, and so we're constantly doing entrepreneurship in residence. We do workshops across our hospitals and across our medical research institutes. So this is what we do as an organization, and we think it's really important to make sure that whatever we do, it's incorporating the whole ecosystem approach. I thought I might just quickly talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing, which I think are rather interesting. As I said before, we're kind of on this precipice of change in health, and we've been seeing it over the last 3 or 4 years. But the last 2 years, I think have really kind of affirmed how many people are seeing healthcare as a general rule. We were seeing a trend towards more of a health tech, well-being tech, especially in the Asia Pacific, and Australian startups are extremely strong in health tech and well-being. And we were seeing a very consumer-focused part of medtech that we hadn't really seen before. We were seeing patients and consumers demanding access to personal information that they can make more informed choices about their own health. And of course, some of us have spent years at med school, and now we don't need to, because Dr. Google is able to keep us more informed than 8 years of medicine. And so everyone wants access now. And so especially what we're seeing, especially in the areas of Indonesia, in China, in Japan, is our Australian startups moving towards this part of the market, because actually 40% of all the adoption of new healthcare technologies is happening in this part of the world, and not in Europe, and not in North America. And so it's a very dynamic part of the market, and I think this is where Australia really has a unique strength compared to some of the other sort of countries that are located in the region. The other thing that's interesting is that we're finding that this simplicity concept around technology. When I first started, when I did my first, so I've had a few startups. A few have been extremely successful, a few have been extremely horrible, and so the ability to look at it from both lenses of success and failure has been kind of interesting. But what we've certainly learned is that the more complex, the more difficult it tends to be in getting into the markets, and that's extremely true as you move into this kind of consumer space, and this mix between sort of consumer and healthcare. And it's a little bit grey area. But we're seeing a really unique opportunity to start thinking slightly differently about how we manufacture, how we use, how we consider technologies. And Australia, I think, is really taking a lead in part of this movement. And the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of startups are having a slightly different focus to perhaps what we saw many years ago. As we know, healthcare is a very capitalist concept. We're there to make profits. And now we're seeing a movement towards impact healthcare. So how can we make sure that healthcare isn't just a privilege, but it's a right for everybody? And so lots of Australian startups are taking a dual approach to how they think about healthcare, both from the likes of the US, the Europeans, the Japanese countries, as well as accessing a similar technology across India, Indonesia, Philippines, with a more volume-based concept and perhaps a simpler version of their technology. So they're trying to drive two parallel business models into an area that's really interesting, and we're seeing a very dynamic approach to this right now, and we think it's extremely useful, but also it's impactful in many different ways. And so being able to provide healthcare across a whole generation of people is extremely useful. And so these business models are becoming more effective and more useful. And of course, certainly everything that we're seeing at the moment, whether it's a diagnostic, a device, whether it's a simple wearable concept, is that it's all connected, and people want access. They want to be able to connect to other orientations, other devices that they have. They want it to be personalized to their own information. And of course, if we look at some of the corporates and the directions we're getting from the corporates, it's all about how can we make sure the information we're giving out gives direct access to a patient. So they also have some level of control or input to their own illness, whether it be chronic or acute. And so it's a very interesting part of the market that we're seeing. As I said before, we're seeing capital coming from all different kinds of family offices, from all different kinds of corporates that we haven't seen prior to the COVID. So I think, for a startup at this moment in time to be producing something that is globally relevant is a really great opportunity. And just going back to Duncan and Alfredo's comments, Australia really presents itself as a unique place to grow early stage opportunities because of the tax incentives, because of the clinical trial capabilities, because of the access to clinicians as well, and the openness of clinicians to get involved in these early stage ventures, both as advisors but also as investors, I think is quite useful and quite unique in many ways. And it's a very collaborative nation, and it's I think everyone is driving the same sort of innovative procedure and the same sort of innovative thought. So I only had about 10 minutes to talk. Hopefully that was a bit of use and gave you an insight into what we're seeing in the medtech space across startups. Always happy to have a conversation if everyone wants to talk further. Thanks, Luca.
Thank you, Bas. Thank you for the insights really about the medtech startup trends. I think that they were really to the point. And congratulations also to the actuator, because scalability is one of the key elements. And sometimes you have accelerator programs, they tend to look just at the domestic market and they don't think global. Well, for example, you already proved that the growth of the actuator is really proof of scalability and proof of the guidance you are giving to the startup. So congratulations on that. And in regard to scalability, I must say that it might be interesting in the future also to have a conversation with, let's say, some areas in Flanders, such as Ghent and Leuven, where we have some quite interesting accelerator programs as well. So thank you, Bas. And please let me now introduce Shanti Chutan, Assistant Director of the Devices Application Section of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So TGA is basically the regulatory agency of the Australian government. Shanti, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca. And I will try sharing my screen now.
Perfect.
So good evening, good morning, depending on the time zone you are in. My name is Shanti, and I'm a regulatory officer in the Medical Devices Authorization Branch in the TGA, which is the national regulator for therapeutic goods. And the Medical Devices Authorization Branch focuses on the pre-market review and approval of medical devices for supply and use in Australia.
Shanti, so just one thing, if you want to put the full screen mode, so it would be probably...
Sorry, I didn't realize that.
Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you. So today I'll give you a brief overview of the regulatory framework we have in place for medical devices, and also the TGA review process. Apologies that I have to keep my camera off because I'm having some major streaming issues here, but hopefully the presentation will go smoothly. So all therapeutic goods, which includes medicines, medical devices, biologicals, other therapeutic goods, which are products which kind of sit on the fence like surface disinfectants, they are all regarded as therapeutic goods in Australia, and they must be entered on the Australian Register for Therapeutic Goods before they can be lawfully supplied or imported or exported from Australia. So today we will focus on medical devices. So medical devices include a wide range of products from bandages, syringes, x-rays, implants, pacemakers, etc. So in Australia, we do have a definition in the Therapeutic Goods Act 1989, specifically Section 41BD of the Act, which defines a medical device as any product that can be used for the diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, or alleviation of any disease, injury, or disability. And the definition also covers products which are used in the investigation, replacement, or modification of anatomy or a physiological process. And we do consider any products that can support or control conception as a medical device. So the key thing to remember here is that the product should not achieve its intended use via a pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic mechanism, because then it will make it a medicine. And we also consider accessories to medical devices as medical devices. So an example would be a mobile application, which is used to control or support an infusion pump, an insulin infusion pump. So the pump itself is a medical device, and so would be the mobile app. So one thing to note here is that when it comes to including or registering our device on the Australian register, is that the inclusion is for a kind of medical device. So this means that one entry for a medical device on the ARTG may actually cover multiple different products which are of the same kind, rather than a single model or an individual device. So if the medical device, if the group of medical devices have a same sponsor, so sponsor is the term that we use for a legal supplier in Australia. So the same legal supplier, same legal manufacturer, same risk classification, and if they can all be categorized under the same device nomenclature code, then essentially a single ARTG entry can cover multiple devices. So in other words, you can actually group multiple devices of the same kind on the ARTG. So for the higher risk category devices, like the class 3 medical devices, an example would be a pacemaker. We also would group the devices which have the same device name or unique product identifier. So in Australia, medical devices are classified according to the level of harm they pose to the end user or patients. So there are essentially 4 risk classification levels. So class 1 devices, which include class 1 sterile and class 1 measuring devices. Class 2As, which are the low risk devices. Class 2Bs are the low to medium high risk devices. Class 3s are the highest risk devices. So the range of medical devices will run from a simple medical glove to a surgically inserted pacemaker. So please refer to Schedule 2 of the Australian Medical Devices Regulations for the relevant classification rules that will be applicable to a medical device, because whilst the Australian framework very closely aligns with the European one, there are some devices where Australia has a different risk classification level. So now, what's the process of including a medical device on the ARTG? So the first step is you need a legal supplier or a sponsor who will make an application to the TGA. And this legal supplier must hold all the relevant data related to the quality, safety, and performance of the device. The device also must have a conformity assessment certification in place. So essentially, a conformity assessment certification is like a quality assurance certificate for the device. And the other requirement is that the device should comply with the Australian essential principles listed in the regulations. So the TGA's essential principles, or EPs, sets out the requirements related to the safety and performance characteristics of medical devices. And EPs apply to all medical devices, regardless of their intended purpose or risk classification. However, there will be some specific essential principles related to particular devices. So, for example, for an implantable device that is supplied sterile, EPs related to sterility and biomaterial safety will be relevant. For a defibrillator, it will be EPs related to electrical safety. So I just wanted to further expand on the conformity assessment certification. So as mentioned in the previous slide, a manufacturer should hold an appropriate quality assurance certificate when making an application to the TGA. So this conformity assessment certificate or quality management certificate, it's usually issued by a regulatory body or a third-party certifier based on the evidence submitted by the manufacturer. So for TGA, this certificate essentially is like an evidence that the manufacturer has been assessed and evaluated by an independent certifier to check that they have all the appropriate systems in place for that medical device. And part of that conformity assessment certification also will cover the relevant essential principles related to the device. So we have 14 essential principles, but depending on the risk classification and intended use and the type of device, it will be a combination of a few different ones that will be relevant for the device. So there are a range of conformity assessment certifications or procedures that are appropriate for each risk category. And the higher risk devices, they require a more rigorous scrutiny as well. So TGA does accept quality management certificates or conformity assessment certificates from comparable overseas regulators. And a conformity assessment certificate issued by a European certifying body in accordance with the European Medical Devices Directive, which is the old directive, and also certificates issued under the new European framework, which is the EU MDR framework. They're all acceptable to the TGA. And TGA will also accept certificates issued under the Medical Devices Single Audit Program, or MDSAP. And we also accept Health Canada license approvals from the US FDA and also Japanese pre-market approvals. So there is a full list available for your reference of acceptable overseas QMS certificates. So for that, please refer to the legal instrument that's referred in the slide at the bottom of the slide. It's the 2018 determination. So if we look at a general trend, majority of the devices that are supplied in Australia have European certification. As mentioned before, so from 2018, we are accepting quality management certificates from other overseas regulators as well. And from last month onwards, as part of further reducing the regulatory burden on the industry, We have also repealed a legal requirement of having a TGA certification for the higher risk devices, which included devices with animal or microbial origin materials. So those devices can now make use of their European certification to enter the Australian market. So now looking at the application process, so the first step when making an application is to submit the conformity assessment or QMS certificate for the device. So once the certificate is reviewed and okayed by the TGA, you can submit your medical device application. And once the application is made, we will review the information within the application, and based on that preliminary review, if we need further evidence to make sure that the device is complying with the Australian requirements, we may select the application for an audit review, which is a more detailed review. If your application is selected for audit, you will be notified within the first 20 working days itself. So it's a very quick decision process. So within the first 20 days, what we essentially look for in the medical device application is whether you have the right quality management certificate linked to the device, whether you have correctly classified the device, etc. So if you have submitted an application for a pacemaker, and if the risk classification is a class 1, then unfortunately the application will not pass that preliminary review, and you will be notified within the first 20 days that you cannot proceed further, and it will be rejected by the TGA. However, if you pass the preliminary assessment, there is a likelihood, depending on the risk classification of the device, that TGA might ask a few further information. It could be anything like the user manual for the device, or it could be data related to the clinical evidence, or engineering or bench testing data. And TGA will then review that extra information under an audit review. So usually the scope of the audit itself will be decided based on the type of device or the device category. So we have 2 levels of audit assessment. One is the level 1 audit, which is an abridged assessment which focuses more on the labeling, user manual, etc. for the device. A level 2 audit is a more in-depth review where, as I mentioned before, we can request for evidence related to the clinical data, bench testing, sterility assessment, etc. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We do have a helpline team in the devices branch through which you can always send your inquiries and questions. And if we can't provide an answer straight away, they'll get in touch with the business areas for further advice. And we usually aim to provide the response within a very reasonable time frame. And we also have a few other channels to assist the industry. So you can always request for pre-submission meetings with the TGA. And there is a form for that. The link is provided on the slide. And there is a dedicated section in the TGA who assists the small to medium business enterprises. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Shanti. I'm very sure that your presentation has been very useful for the Flemish companies that are interested in entering the Australian market, because of very detailed information about the process. So thank you for that. If possible, to stop sharing
Sure.
your presentation, and I'm glad to introduce Kai Shepland, as a medical account manager of the Flemish company Materialise that has already been operating in Australia for a while. Thank you, Kai. The floor is yours. And I'm conscious of the time is passing, but too many important information to pass to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you very much, Luca and Gwen and the team for putting this together. I know it takes a little bit of wrangling, but really appreciate it. So my name's Kyle Shapland. I'm the Australian New Zealand Medical Account Manager for our medical software solutions here at Materialise. Materialise, as Luca mentioned, is a very proud Belgian company. So we would definitely encourage all of you to have a look at the opportunities here and come fly the flag. What has also been fantastic about today is the speaker list, and so from someone who is heavily involved in the industry here, I can only commend the group that's here, because for those of you based in Belgium who are looking for resources, this is probably one of the best lineups you could have had. So thank you very much to all of my fellow speakers. It's a very basic, very quick agenda. So for those who aren't aware of us, I'll do a quick little introduction to Materialise, give you a brief and basic update on our current sort of market involvement, how we sort of fit into the MedTech, and then I think we probably won't have time for questions, but you're all more than welcome to get in contact with me. At Materialise and the Materialise medical side of the business, we definitely keep this as our mission statement. So Materialise Medical enables image-based planning and medical 3D printing for researchers, engineers and clinicians to create a better and healthier world. So we like to sort of call ourselves the backbone of the additive manufacturing industry, and it's definitely something that we take pride in the medical side of our business. So a little Materialise background for those who are not so familiar. Materialise is based in Leuven. We have 2,300 staff in offices globally. Materialise itself is a technology-based company, so it specialises primarily in 3D technologies, and we're active in industries ranging from aeronautical and automotive all the way through to orthotics and medical devices. So a really broad spectrum of additive manufacturing use, where the medical side of the business is one of our core pillars. So we've been active in the healthcare industry for more than 30 years now, and we've primarily been involved with the engineering of our software. We've done plenty of surgical planning, the services that we offer to a number of different medical device companies, and the devices that we actually produce and create ourselves. Our software and services currently help around 50,000 patients globally every single year. We've created more than 350,000 patient-specific models, guides, and implants, and our software has been used in more than 5 million DICOM outputs. So the numbers are really starting to rack up for us here. So this is sort of a very good split of the three different sections of the Materialise business. So Materialise is uniquely positioned across that additive manufacturing industry, as I suggested. Our software helps those in manufacturing with industrial outcomes and improved workflows. That automation is key to the industrial sector, so we like to try and put ourselves right in the middle. We also manufacture products for our clients. We have a 3D printer park, as we refer to it, also in Leuven, which base 148 3D printers. So these are some pretty full-on bits of tech, and on the medical side, we look after the manufacturing and servicing of the medical device industry. So from a Materialise perspective, and something that's sort of come up through the other speakers, is that sort of being a part of that ecosystem is key to any success in the medtech industry, and one of the things we definitely try to drive with our software is establishing best practices, mitigating risks, and compliance with regulatory standards. So to be able to put that forward as a almost as a product for our clients is super important to the success and or failure of a medical device company's products. So, as I referred to before, part of being the backbone of the 3D printing industry means that we cover everything from image acquisition all the way through to 3D printed model or device. So anything along that chain, we've probably got a product in it, and we've probably got something in development as part of it as well. So, as I referred to it before as an ecosystem, here you have some of the globe's largest image-based companies and printing business and additive manufacturing businesses, and we either have agreements or these companies either purchase our software or purchase our services. So you can see just from an additive manufacturing perspective, not even medical-based, all of these rely on Materialise to function in some capacity. So in Australia, we are essentially at this stage a commercial-only office. We've got a pretty small team. There's just a couple of us here, but that has certain plans to grow over the coming years, and we are primarily focused in the medical sector itself. Out of that, there are three different pillars of it. So we have the software that we supply, the services that we provide, and then the devices in medical implants that we actually sell as well. So when it comes to our software in particular, we work in three very key areas. So academia, so it's your universities, university hospitals and hospitals in general, and then medical device companies. So to be a little bit more specific, so just to sort of give you some examples of what we might do in each. So for universities, when it comes to our software, we might provide a software that a biomedical engineering department might use to segment through a whole bunch of data stacks to create modeling. And some of the services we provide to universities is the actual printing of their models, just if they don't necessarily have the printing technology to do it themselves in-house. From a medical device company's perspective, we offer the software that will allow them to create the devices that they sell into the market, but also everything from the ability to R&D new technology as well. And then from a services perspective, we offer everything from the surgical planning and clinical sort of hand-holding process all the way through to device creation and printing for companies as well. And then in hospitals, it's 2D templating through to 3D virtual modeling and surgical planning as a software side of the business, all the way through to printing guides and anatomical models for hospitals as well. So the various academic applications we have. So if you are involved in a university or you want to be involved in a university, you will normally find us predominantly in biomedical engineering departments. Because of the unique wildlife we have in Australia, we're actually very heavily involved in a number of the different natural sciences through to paleontology. And then you'll find us in a number of the medical schools as well. When it comes to hospitals, the various sort of applications you'll find for us there is point of care facilities. We provide a lot of surgical planning for whether that be one-on-one or for hospitals in general, and then a lot of clinical training for clinicians as well. When I talk about a point of care facility, crudely speaking, we look at it as a multi-department integrated together, multiple departments integrated together to share images and resources to best support patient outcomes. So, that's the the radiology department using, say, our software to create 3D virtual models that go through to the cardiovascular department so that the clinician can use those models to find defects and do surgical planning. It's also, can be quite good for interaction with patients as well. In the Australian office in particular, we look at building a point of care facility in 3 major steps. Step 1 would be using validated software like our Mimics to create 3D virtual models. Step 2 would be using that software then to print surgical guides and anatomical models. And at this stage, although it's definitely coming, but we can't probably see for the next couple of years at least, is step 3 would be basically printing medical devices at the point of care. So hospitals having that skill set and that technology to be able to go basically straight from DICOM image, CT scan, all the way through to printing a device in-house. So it's not there yet. The skill set is still being built here in Australia, and if that's something you in Belgium think you could be a part of, that's probably a good gap for the Australian market at the moment. One of our major point of care facilities here in Australia is the Hurston Biofab institution, which is in the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital. It's headed up by a gentleman called Dr. Michael Vagels. And if you're looking for any examples of a point of care facility, I can't rave enough about how fantastic the work they're doing there. So the different medical device company applications. So using software for device R&D or helping with device R&D. We do engineering services as well, helping with quality management systems and helping with basically device and product workflows, and then printing devices and clinical services as well. From a software perspective, if you think of any of the major device companies, so you're anywhere from your KLS Martins to your Zimmer Biomets to your Stryker, they all use our software. If you think of a company like Johnson & Johnson here in Australia, from a craniomaxillofacial, so the CMF department area, we do Johnson & Johnson and diffuse synthesis services. So you can sort of see here how they all sort of work together and when we sort of keep that together as well. A current market involvement for medical devices, just quickly, you can sort of see here we've got a...
Kyle, sorry to interrupt you because
Sure.
I'm conscious of the time.
Sure.
Could you just possibly in 1, maximum 2 minutes
Sure.
indicate how Metralise is started operating here? Because I'm familiar with the fact that part of the Australian journey of your company basically is based on a close collaboration with universities, and that might be something of interest for a Flemish audience.
Sure. So if anyone's aware of Materialise's origin, Frida, our CEO, was studying at the University of Leuven. There was they sort of saw the great use of a 3D printer in Bremen, and so the university then sort of purchased their own and worked out best ways to use it. And so we use a very collaborative approach here in Australia. We've been here sort of selling commercially for probably 10 years, but sort of boots on the ground is more sort of 3 to 4 years. Originally sort of our way into Australia almost as our anchor client is Griffith University, which is the engineering department I'm sat in now. It's where our office is based. And so by building collaborations, it's meant that you can sort of springboard yourself into other parts of the Australian market. And so you sort of can give yourself that validity and authenticity as a company. And by supporting wherever you possibly can, you sort of can move yourself through the Australian market. So.
Thank you, Kyle. And I do apologize for rushing you in the conclusion, but I'm very conscious of the fact that I know it's probably my fault because it was a very ambitious program with but so many angles to introduce to the Flemish audience. So now let me introduce our last but certainly not less important speaker, Claire, Events Director at House Biotech. Claire, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca, and thank you everyone for joining me. I will talk very quickly, just in the interest of your time. So my name is Claire Beattie. I'm the Events Director at AusBiotech, and just briefly about AusBiotech, we are the national industry body representing and advocating for organisations doing business in and with the global life sciences economy. So AusBiotech started with less than 100 members in 1986, and 35 years later, we've grown to over 3,000 members, and we represent the entire value chain of biotechnology development. We endeavour to foster a growing and strong and profitable biotechnology and life sciences industry in Australia through representation, advocacy, and the provision of services and benefits to our members to help the industry continuously grow. Part of these services and platforms we offer at AusBiotech is our extensive events program, which is why I'm here. And I'll quickly just touch on a few of the different types of events we run annually, and then I'll get straight into the MedTech conference, which I hope you will all attend. So each calendar quarter, we run a number of networking events and roundtable discussions in every state of Australia, COVID permitting, of course, where our network can gather together and connect with each other, exchange ideas, information, and create ongoing partnerships. During the pandemic, we launched our Biotech Talks and Biotech Pitch virtual event series, which was highly popular, given that we couldn't meet face-to-face during the height of the pandemic. And we'll be continuing these types of events into the future to keep our regional members engaged, or when there is a time-sensitive matter to communicate to our national membership. Along with this, AusBiotech also manages the Australian delegation over to BioUSA, and we also project manage the Australian Pavilion over there each year. There are a number of other events that we provide for our network, but I'll move on to our two larger flagship events that we provide annually. Our National AusBiotech Conference, which in 2022 will be held in Perth in Western Australia from the 25th to the 28th of October. And also running in that same week is our Australia Invest and Partnering event, which is a full day dedicated to our investment program, which will also be hosted in Perth during that same conference week. Now, I guess onto the reason I'm mainly here with you today, and that's to talk about our MedTech conference. So MedTech is Australia's premier medical technology conference and provides a platform that brings together key stakeholders of the Australian and international devices and diagnostics sector. Everyone you've heard from today, everything that they've spoken about today, you'll be able to hear from, speak to, and learn from at this conference. So I hope you can all make it. In 2022, our MedTech conference will be held at the Melbourne Convention Centre from the 24th to the 26th of May. We'll be back face-to-face for the first time in a couple of years after managing all the pandemic has brought all of us. We're extremely excited about this event and hope you can all join us here in Australia. As you can see from this slide, the key elements of the program include a two-day speaking program that address the key issues and trends across the MedTech pipeline. It includes keynotes, plenary discussions, as well as concurrently run breakout sessions. It also includes an early stage investment forum. Additionally, throughout the conference, there is a MedTech industry exhibition. This is where also all of our catering breaks, our welcome function, our closing ceremonies, all of that sort of thing will be held within the exhibition. Another element of the conference is AusPartnering, which is our business matching program where attendees are able to book meetings and meet with each other throughout the conference in private meeting rooms on site. There are a number of elements to the AusMedTech conference that you can participate in, whether it's interactive Q&As, the one-on-one Aus partnering meetings, meet with potential collaborators, or our other extensive networking programs. It also includes a gala dinner within the conference program as well. Again, as you can see on this slide, we have a number of opportunities open for those interested in being part of AusMedTech 2022. Currently, we have a call for sessions open, and this is open until the end of the month. Therefore, if you would like to submit something for our program, there's still an option for you to do so. Our program committee is meeting currently to talk about the program topics, the speakers, the keynotes, etc. Therefore, if you do have an interesting topic that you would like on the program, I'd advise you to get in quick before all of these spots are filled. Our exhibition and sponsorship opportunities are also open, and there's various prospects available. Please contact myself through AusBiotech if there's nothing that quite suits your needs, which all of which are on the website ausmedtech.com.au. There's a prospectus on there. And if there's nothing that quite suits your needs, I can create something for you. That's what we're about at AusBiotech, providing value that suits you. So all early bird tickets are also open until early next year, where we'll also be launching our speaking program and other various elements of the conference, including opening our early stage investment forum applications. So I sincerely hope to see you at AusMedTech in 2022. Thank you to Luca and Flanders Investment Trade, who are always great supporters of AusMedTech as well as our other event programs. And thank you so much. Please let me know if you have any questions, either during this webcast, during Q&A, if there's time, or just send me a direct email. I can talk all day about AusBiotech events, so feel free to call me anytime. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Claire. And just to add on what you said, I must say that Flanders Investment Trade participated in the this year the online event, but in the past also in person, and it's really the place to be in the industry. It's amazing. You have all the people that are from in the industry that you want to meet and talk to them. So of course it will depend also how the pandemic will proceed, how our national borders will proceed. Yes, we can just finger crossed.
Yes.
But thank you for your presentation, and I'm incredibly conscious and somehow also sorry because it took more than expected in terms of time. So probably there's no time for questions, even though I had ready to prepare for some of you, but I will spare you. But what is important also for the audience is that all the presentation will be available, so please send an email also to melbourne@fitagency.com, and or if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us, and we will be more than happy to pass contact details of the speakers and the presentation that they provided today. So thank you again. Thank you, absolutely thank you to the speakers. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. That's more important even. That was great, and I think that this is just a start. So in the meantime, that also behind the windows of Buzz is nighttime here now. Before there was a nice sky. But anyway, thank you to Duncan, Alfredo, Buzz, Shanti, Kyle, and Claire. And again, thank you to our partners in Belgium, Agoria, and MedTech Flanders. And thank you also to my colleagues that made this possible. Again, have a good day, and thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Luca.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.